Imagine walking into a luxury hotel suite and hearing a maid answer the phone, not in broken phrases but in flawless native Dutch. Now picture the man watching her, a millionaire, used to commanding boardrooms, suddenly frozen by a voice he never expected. What happens when the invisible worker in the background reveals brilliance no one ever bothered to see? What happens when wealth, power, and prejudice collide with truth in the most unexpected way? Stay with this story, because what began as a simple phone call would soon unravel into a journey of hidden talents, shattered assumptions, and a life forever changed. In the towering heart of Amsterdam stood a hotel that glistened with wealth. Guests from across the world streamed through its glass doors, their expensive shoes clicking against the polished marble floors. For most of them, the hotel was just a place to indulge, to relax, and to display the wealth that seemed limitless. But for the staff hidden in the quiet corners, the cleaners, porters, and waitresses, it was a place of service, often unnoticed and seldom appreciated. Among them was Amara, a young black woman who worked tirelessly as a maid. She moved through the grand corridors with her cart of supplies, her presence as discreet as the fragrance of the fresh linens she carried. She had trained herself to be invisible, to blend into the background of luxury. To the guests, she was just another uniform. But behind that uniform was a woman who had journeyed across continents, who carried stories of struggle, resilience, and ambition. She had come to the Netherlands years ago with dreams far larger than what her current life showed. Yet, like so many immigrants, she had learned that opportunities often came disguised as hardship. Day after day, she worked quietly, her brilliance hidden beneath the dust cloths and cleaning sprays. On most days, her shift ended without event. But one ordinary morning, as she bent down to polish the brass door handles of a suite, a single phone call would unravel everything, transforming her life and shaking the assumptions of a man whose wealth had shielded him from ever seeing people like her clearly. The room she was cleaning belonged to one of the wealthiest guests the hotel had hosted that season, a man whose name appeared regularly in international business magazines. Willem van der Velde, a self-made millionaire, had built empires from shipping to technology, and wherever he went, whispers followed. He was known for being aloof, impatient, and sometimes cruel with staff. Most avoided being in his presence longer than necessary. Amara had learned to time her cleaning so she would rarely cross paths with guests like him. Yet that morning, while she was tidying the suite, the room phone began to ring. The sound startled her. Normally, she would have ignored it. It wasn't her place to answer. But after the fourth shrill ring, she felt a strange instinct. Perhaps it was because she knew missing calls in a luxury suite could cause complaints. So she picked it up. On the other end was a caller speaking rapid Dutch, filled with formal phrases and urgency. Amara listened carefully. Her face remained calm, but inside, she felt a familiar rhythm she had not spoken in years. Without hesitation, she responded in fluent Dutch, her tone sharp yet respectful, weaving words with a precision that only the truly fluent could manage. What Amara didn't realize was that Willem had entered the suite at that very moment. He froze in the doorway, his eyes narrowing, watching the maid whose hands smelled faintly of cleaning solutions speak his language with a fluency that rivaled his own. Her voice carried the confidence of education, of someone who belonged in boardrooms rather than hidden in service uniforms. For the first time in years, the powerful man felt curiosity about someone who was supposed to remain invisible to him. Willem stood silently, studying her as she finished the call. Every detail struck him, the way her posture straightened while she spoke, the richness of her accent, and the calm authority she carried. It was not the voice of someone subservient. It was the voice of someone who had known knowledge, culture, and perhaps even power. Amara ended the call gracefully, carefully placing the receiver back into its cradle. When she turned, she found his sharp gaze fixed on her. A rush of unease swept through her chest. Had she overstepped? Was he about to complain, report her, or worse, demand her dismissal. But Willem didn't speak. He simply tilted his head, as though seeing her for the very first time. It was an unsettling silence for Amara, but for Willem, it was the beginning of an obsession. He had built his life on reading people, spotting opportunities where others saw nothing. And here, before him, was a contradiction too striking to ignore. A hotel maid who carried herself like a diplomat. For the remainder of the day, Willem found his mind wandering back to her. He wondered about her origins, her education, and why someone like her was scrubbing floors instead of running companies. But most of all, he wondered if he had underestimated an entire class of people simply because society trained him to. That night, in his penthouse suite, the millionaire made a decision. He would see her again, not as a guest seeing staff, but as a man searching for truth in the shadows of a story that demanded to be told. The following days blurred into routine for Amara, though she couldn't shake the weight of Willem's stare. She told herself it was nothing. Guests often looked at staff like they were objects, not people. Still, something about his silence unnerved her. Meanwhile, Willem began discreet inquiries. He asked the hotel manager about the maid, careful to sound casual, but the man knew little beyond her work ethic. "She's quiet, reliable, hardly ever complains," the manager said, dismissing her as unremarkable. Yet Willem couldn't accept that. One afternoon, Willem lingered in the lobby, watching her push her cleaning cart toward the elevators. To others, she was invisible. To him, she had become the most fascinating figure in the hotel. What drove her? Why would someone who clearly carried intelligence and grace spend her life in thankless labor? The truth was layered. Amara had once been a student of linguistics. She had grown up in Suriname, a former Dutch colony, where her family encouraged her education. She had studied languages with passion, mastering Dutch, English, French, and even fragments of German. Her dream had been to become a translator for international organizations. But life, as it often does for immigrants, had twisted the path. When her father fell ill and her family struggled financially, Amara sacrificed her studies and took on jobs to support them. Cleaning in a hotel paid little, but it paid steadily. To the world, she was just a maid. But beneath that uniform was a mind capable of shifting worlds. Willem didn't know this yet, but he would soon. The moment of reckoning came on a rainy Thursday evening. The hotel hosted a private networking event filled with CEOs, investors, and politicians. Willem was, as always, at the center of attention. But as he scanned the room, he spotted her, Amara, quietly collecting glasses from tables. What happened next could not have been scripted. One of the foreign guests struggled to converse with a Dutch politician, the language barrier creating awkward pauses. Before anyone else could intervene, Amara gently stepped forward. With flawless ease, she translated the conversation into English, bridging the gap with poise that silenced the entire room. All eyes turned toward her. Some looked amused. How strange. A maid speaking like a scholar. Others looked unsettled, uncomfortable that someone from the background had stepped into the light. But Willem's reaction was different. His chest tightened, not with embarrassment but with admiration. For years, he had believed intellect belonged only to boardrooms and elite schools. Yet here was proof that brilliance often wore uniforms the world chose not to see. When the guests dispersed, Willem made his move. He asked to see her, not as staff, but as someone whose story he needed to understand. For the first time, Amara realized the walls between worlds might be thinner than she thought. Their conversation took place in the quiet of the hotel library, a place few guests ever visited. Willem asked questions, not the shallow kind, but ones that revealed genuine curiosity. And Amara, cautious at first, shared fragments of her journey. She told him about her love for languages, about the scholarships she nearly secured, about the choices she had made to keep her family afloat. She explained how people often dismissed her, assuming her worth based only on her job. She had learned to endure the invisibility, but it had slowly chipped away at her dreams. For Willem, every word was a revelation. He had spent decades believing his wealth defined intelligence, that power determined value. But here was a woman whose wisdom outshone most of the executives he had met, and she had been overlooked simply because she wore a uniform. By the end of the night, Willem realized something profound. The true wealth of a society lay not in its billionaires, but in the hidden talents of those it ignored. And for the first time in his life, he felt ashamed of his blindness. The next morning, Willem made a call, not for business, but for change. He used his connections to recommend Amara to an international organization searching for translators. Within months, her world shifted from cleaning suites to sitting in conference halls, her voice carrying across nations as she translated with elegance and precision. The hotel staff watched in awe as the maid who had once been invisible became someone impossible to ignore. Willem too changed, his arrogance softened by the realization that greatness often hides in places no one bothers to look. Yet, as Amara stood on the stage of her first international assignment, she carried with her the memory of those years of invisibility. She knew there were countless others like her, brilliant, capable, and hidden behind society's blind spots. And so the story leaves us with a question. How many dreams have we ignored simply because they came dressed in uniforms we were taught not to see?